Alright, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be looking at the iconic Masters downshifted commons. Masters sets are always kind of exciting when it comes to Pauper, just because we get so many powerful cards. Like there's a new set every couple of months, and we get, tons of new cards for Pauper. But when a Master set comes out, cards get downshifted from uncommon and rare down to common. And so, more often than not, a master set being released does tend to result in some kind of new, a new deck or a new archetype. It's not always tier 1. With the last master set, Modern Masters 3, we had the Mortician Beetle, black-green sacrifice thing. So yeah, that's what happens when a master set comes out. There's always something that comes from it. And once again, we've got iconic masters. We've got a lot of downshifted cards into common. New Pauper legal powerful cards. I'm going to go over every single one of them, and we'll do it color by color. But before we get into it, I want to talk about a series of cards. These are rebound spells. So we have Emerge Unscathed, Virulent Swipe, Praise Vengeance, and Survival Cache. So Survival Cache is the one that I'm least interested in, but the others have a lot of potential. These are all 1-mana spells. Praise Vengeance gives +2/+2, Virulent Swipe gives +2/+0 and Death Touch, and Emerge Unscathed gives protection from a color. But then the Rebound ability says that we exile it, and at the beginning of our next upkeep, we get to cast those cards again. So these cards are going to be really good in Spells Matters decks. Decks like Is It Blitz and Infect. Like, look at Praise Vengeance, for example, and an Infect deck. It's basically 1 mana, and you get 4 poison counters out of it. Obviously, that's over 2 turns, so these aren't perfect, but I could definitely see these being in an Infect deck or an Is It Blitz style deck. A deck that's going to care about casting spells, just because you get 2 triggers out of them. So we'll see what these do. I'm kind of curious if the more competitive Infect and Is It Blitz style decks will try to incorporate these or not. It's definitely worth playtesting at the very least. So moving on to the rest of the cards, we'll go color by color here. In blue we have Jace's Phantasm, Dissolve, Riverwheel Aerialist, and Jessian Thief. I don't know if any of these are going to be super competitive. So Jace's Phantasm is a 1-mana 1/1 with flying. Gets +4/+4 if your opponent has 10 or more cards in a graveyard. So this is a beater for potentially mill decks. And there's a black card for mill decks too. We'll get to that in a bit. If you have a blue-black mill deck, there's some potential here. But as it is, it's a 1-mana 1/1 with flying. Gets +4/+4. So it has the potential of being a 1-mana 5/5 with flying, which is really good, especially in Pauper. 5 damage flying in Pauper is pretty extreme, especially for 1 mana. But it's probably not going to be worth building around. Blue control decks are going to be happy with Stormbound Geist, for example. Black decks already have Gurmag Angler. The flying's nice, but Gurmag Angler kind of just beats anyway without needing flying. So I don't know how much impact this is going to have. Dissolve is okay. It's a 3-mana counterspell. Those tend to not be super appealing. But it does have Scry 1, and scrying is always nice, especially in control decks. Maybe this is something that a control deck will use 1 copy of, right? Maybe you just throw 1 copy in, you hope not to get it until the late game, you top deck it late game, and then you have a counter spell, you have plenty of mana, and you have a scry effect, which is nice. That's perfectly possible. Probably not going to see 4 of these, but you never know. A 3-mana counter spell is a bit expensive, but definitely, again, I could see 1 or 2 of these in a blue control deck for sure. And then Riverwheel Aerialist is just kind of weird. It's a 6-mana 4/5 with flying and prowess. I mean, it's a big creature. It's a very big, powerful creature. It's just expensive. 6 mana is a lot. I don't really see this as being super playable. And then next up we have Jessian Thief, which is actually really good. It's a 3-mana 1/3 with prowess, so it gets +1/+1 whenever we play a spell. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card, which is really, really good. I just don't think it's going to replace Ninja of the Deep Hours. Ninja of the Deep Hours can, surprise your opponent, come in, deal damage, get a card every single time. This doesn't have that kind of surprise element that the Ninja does. But the prowess is interesting. Maybe this is something that's used in Is It Blitz decks as well. I don't know, because, it's 3 mana, it's a 3-mana creature. But it has prowess, and being able to draw cards and something like Is It Blitz would definitely be useful, but It's a really, really good card. It's just that there are better options. This would definitely be a budget Ninja of the Deep Hours, though. Ninja of the Deep Hours is very expensive right now. So if you can't afford that, then you could definitely use this in a budget deck. Moving on to white, we get Sustainer of the Realm, Angel of Mercy, Seeker of the Way, and then the aforementioned Emerge Unscathed and Survival Cache. So I don't think Sustainer of the Realm is playable at all. 4 mana, 2/3 with flying, gets +0/+2 when it blocks. Not much to talk about here. Angel of Mercy also probably isn't playable. 5 mana, 3/3 with flying is nothing great. And the 3 life is fine, but it's just not super impactful. Seeker of the Way is super interesting though. I often think that a good way to tell if a card is going to be good in Pauper is whether or not it was good in Standard, and Seeker of the Way was played in Standard. It was played in red-white decks, like heroic-based decks with Theros, and I think that's exactly what this would be good for in Pauper, just because this card is so good with heroics. If you have this and the Satyr Wayfinder in play, it does actually become very overpowering. The lifelink is very nice. A 2 mana 2/2 that's going to get +1/+1 and lifelink whenever you play a spell is very powerful. I don't think, Heroics is going to be a tier 1 deck, but if you're playing Heroics, and if you're playing red-white Heroics, this is definitely something you're going to want in your deck. I don't know how competitive it will be, or if it will be at all, but I think this has a lot of potential. And then finally, Survival Cache. I didn't talk about this much in the Rebound portion of this video. It's just kind of meh, 3 mana, gain 2 life. You draw a card if you have more life than your opponent, which is actually really good, especially since you get it back a second time the next turn. But it's a win more card for sure. If you're ahead on life, then you get 2 cards. If you're losing, then you just get 2 life, and it's just not that exciting. I don't know, I don't really see it as being something that I would want to play, so I don't really see it as being super noteworthy. Moving on to green, we have Crowned Ceratok, Ivy Elemental, which was rare in the past. We get Duskdale Worm, Lead the Stampede, Jaddy Offshoot, and then the previously mentioned Praise Vengeance. So I don't think Crowned Ceratok is going to be played at all. It's just a big clunky creature, nothing interesting there. Duskdale Worm is much the same, it's just a big giant creature. Ivy Elemental is much the same as that as well. It's an X mana, X and 1, put X +1/+1 counters on it when it comes into play. So basically, it can be any size that you want. The more mana you spend on it, the bigger it is, though it's also perpetually not worth it, because it's always going to be smaller than you pay for it in mana, but, I guess that's the price of versatility. But again, I don't really see it as being super playable. Maybe Tron plays 1 copy of it, right? You basically don't really want it, but if you top deck it in the late game, and you can cast it for, 13, 15, whatever Tron puts out. Tron puts out so much mana. So this could be a new win condition for Tron, not as a consistent win condition, but as a 1 to 2 of in a Tron deck. So I guess that's worthy of note. Next up we have Jaddy Offshoot. I don't know, this is going to be a really good card in sideboards, but beyond that, it's not really playable. It's a 1 mana 0/3 with Defender, and then whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 1 life. This in the sideboard against the burn deck is pretty devastating, though it is obviously within lightning bolt range, so not the worst. It could also be in the sideboard of mana ramp decks. Play against the burn deck, bring Jaddy Offshoot in, and start gaining life whenever you search for your lands. So yeah, there's definitely potential there as a sideboard card. This could be a sideboard staple in green, but obviously probably not something you want to main deck ever. Lead the Stampede is the one that I'm most interested in, because this is played in Modern. Modern Elves plays Lead the Stampede. You get to look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal any number of creatures, and put those into your hand. I've played against elf decks that put a whole 5 creatures into their hand, and it was devastating. Obviously, it does have the chance to go very poorly if you reveal a bunch of lands, but then if you reveal a bunch of lands, you put them on the bottom anyways. Now you're not going to be drawing into them. So yeah, it's not really that terrible. If you've got a green creature-based deck, definitely worth considering as the one and only spell in your deck for sure. Alright, moving on to red, we have Earth Elemental, Furnace Whelp, Mark of Mutiny, Draconic Roar, and Dragon Lord's Servant. I don't really know if any of these are going to be playable at all. I don't think red got a whole lot out of this set. Earth Elemental is probably not playable. 5 mana 4/5 doesn't do anything. Dragon Lord Servant makes dragon spells cost less. There's not a whole lot of dragons in the format, so not really worth noting at all. Draconic Roar is pretty bad. 2 mana to deal 3 damage to a creature, and then if we revealed a dragon card when we cast it, it deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. Not as good as Lightning Bolt. Probably not enough dragons to make this worth anything at all, so just not that great. And then we have Mark of Mutiny. This type of spell just isn't played that often. Gain control of a creature until end of turn is just kind of, It requires your opponent to be beating you to death with a big creature for it to be worth it, and that doesn't solve the problem of the fact that you're probably going to die. And this actually makes it even worse because you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So when you give it back to your opponent with more power. So I don't know, it's probably not something that I would want to play. So again, just not great. And then we have Furnace Whelp, which I believe actually was played in Mirrored and Standard. Maybe not necessarily in Tier 1, I don't remember. But it's nothing too exciting. A 4 mana 2/2 with flying is fine. And then it has fire breathing. It's always hard to tell if this will be good in Pauper or not. It's just there's so much removal. But fire breathing and flying does have the potential to be fairly powerful, but I don't know, it just seems kind of not great. So that's red, I guess. That's what red got out of this. So moving on to black. Black has some interesting stuff, though maybe I'm biased. But we have a Thrill Kill Assassin, a Foul Tongue Invocation, White of Precinct 6, and a Virulent Swipe, which we mentioned earlier. So the least playable is probably Foul Tongue Invocation. It's another dragon-based card. Not enough dragons to make this worth it, and making a player sacrifice a creature for 3 definitely isn't worth it when we have Geth's Verdict and Chainer's Edict, so not going to be playable at all, I don't think. Thrill Kill Assassin is kind of cool though. It's a 2 mana 1/2 with Death Touch, which isn't great, but then it has Unleash, so it can be a 2 mana 2/3 with Death Touch. This is something that I would probably playtest in Shadow Black if you saw me play that deck. If you haven't, I don't recommend it. It was the first series I ever uploaded, and it's terrible. But, it's really good in Mono Black aggro. So yeah, there's potential here. A 2 mana 2/3 with Death Touch isn't the worst if you're just going all in aggro. I would definitely at least test it in Shadow Black. White of Precinct 6 is super janky, but I kind of like it in Pauper. It's a 2 mana 1/1, which isn't interesting at all, but it gets +1/+1 for each creature card in our opponent's graveyard. So first off, obviously it's good in the sideboard against Dredge style decks, or just anything that wants to get Threshold or Delirium or anything like that. But it's also an alternate win condition for mill decks. I mentioned earlier that with Jace's Phantasm, that was a potential beater for mill decks. This is another example of that. There's definitely a janky mill deck there. 4 Phantasms, 4 whites, a whole lot of mill, and, maybe you try to mill your opponent, but if that doesn't work, you've got 8 creatures in your deck that can just beat down. Obviously, it's vulnerable to graveyard hate and stuff like that, but I mean, hey, there's definitely some jankiness there, and I'm a fan of jankiness. So maybe there's a janky, casual, budgety type of thing with white and Phantasm. We'll see. I don't think this is going to have a huge impact on the metagame. It's not going to be competitive. It's not going to be in Tier 1. But for people like me who build janky, stupid decks, White and Phantasm, I don't know. Maybe it's worth trying. And then finally, last, we have the colorless spells. We have Scion of Ugin, Guardian Idol, Darksteel Axe, and Star Compass. So I don't know if any of these are going to be super competitive. Scion of Ugin as a 6 mana 4/4 with flying is pretty much worse than everything. It's even worse than the Riverwheel Aerialist that we saw earlier. So it's strictly worse than something that we've already seen in this video. Darksteel Axe is kind of interesting. I guess we have to harken back to Shadow Black again. Please don't watch that video. Yeah, we played Bone Splitter in that deck, and this is basically, you could play 8 copies of Bone Splitter if you wanted to. It's not as good because you have to pay 2 to equip it, though it is indestructible. So hey, if you like Bone Splitter or Rancor, those style of enchantments and equipment, this is an option as a potential extra copy. Though if you're in green, you should play Bone Splitter over this. Guardian Idol is interesting though. So first off, it's a mana rock. It's a 2 mana artifact, comes into play tapped, but then can tap for an extra mana on turn 3. But the fact that it can become a creature is kind of cool. You know, it's a pretty powerful effect because you have a creature that can just kind of sit back and not be hit with removal, and it can come in and swing when you need it. It is the type of card that could see some play, possibly. And then we get another mana rock in the form of Star Compass. It's a 2-mana artifact that comes into play tapped, but then it can tap for any color of mana that a land you control could produce. So this is interesting. It's an older card. I haven't seen print for a while. It does a mana ramp, but it doesn't necessarily color fix because you need that color in play to begin with in order for this to tap for it. So if you're in a 2-color deck and you're color screwed and you draw this doesn't help because it can only tap for the colors that you already have. I don't know if I would play this over Prophetic Prism, but if you're playing a lot of colors, maybe this is necessary. And it does mana ramp you, so that's something. So that's it, guys. That is every downshifted common. All of these cards were either uncommon or rare in the past. They are now common and Pauper legal. We'll see if anything comes from this. Seeker of the Way has a lot of potential. And again, there's a lot of janky kind of silliness with the white and the Jace's Phantasm. I don't know if we're going to see an entire deck come out of this. But yeah, it looks pretty cool. It looks pretty fun. But anyway, that's it. That's it for now, guys. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're new to the channel, definitely check it out. I play Magic Online a lot. I do pack openings and stuff like this as well. So check out the channel and subscribe if you haven't. And yeah, I guess I will see you guys in the next one.